Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets fall short at home against the Clippers, but Cam Thomas once again goes off cooking from absolutely every single angle. Are we witnessing the new emergence of a potential star in Brooklyn? We break down the game, Cam Thomas, and what it means ahead of the deadline coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants all off-season long on the One Giant podcast. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms. And tell you, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And Doug, where we start is where we have a couple of times this year, slightly looking past the loss, because there was a performance out there from Cam Thomas that I think, at least for our podcast, is opening some eyes in a really big way.
Oh, man, I got to tell you, I said it last game about rooting about as hard as I could root for a team just going these days. I don't find myself in this situation that often. You cover a team for this long, you kind of move away a little bit from the rooting part of it and just kind of go into the analysis part of it, because that's just sort of how it goes, right? You got to it's a little hard to live and die with every game, just because if you're going to go and talk about it every time, that's just the way it is. But
living lives and deaths.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't make it, right? Like you just would, I just wouldn't. I'd have to tap out early. Like I wouldn't make it. This has been such a cool run. I know they lost this game, but this run by Cam and just the team in general, from an energy standpoint and from just like sort of a collective standpoint around, the guys that are sort of left here right now, right? The guys that have had to step up, the guys that have just like had to play big minutes and just do everything they can just to try to just keep the team above water and just even see what's even going on with the squad, right? Kyrie out the door, Ben Simmons can't play, KD's still hurt and, back soon, but not soon enough maybe. And then you get these back-to-back games from Cam Thomas that are like, I mean, transcendent. I'm not really using that word like hyperbole here. Like these are transcendent games. These are like history-making games. Like guys just don't do this. Like it just doesn't happen. Like it's happened a few times. It reminds me of insanity in some ways, right? Like that, just because it's completely out of nowhere. I mean, like we knew he kind of had this in his bag, but no one knew this.
Back-to-back
right?
40-plus performance.
No matter how high you were on Cam, like the biggest Cam lovers could not have seen this like out of nowhere, these two games. So we'll get into it more and like what it means for his future. But I just have to say, as a guy was like not very high on him, like this year and like last year and even out of summer league, I'm fine saying it, right? Like it's just, this is what it is. It's on the record. It's cool. These games have like completely changed my mind, and it really never happens in such a short time for me, but it has happened here. And it is a little window into like, oh, this might be like getting close to what the full realization of a guy like him can be in the NBA. And it's never going to be, it's not going to be 40 points a game, but like, this dude can completely cook with like the best of them when it's really going.
Yeah, I mean, tonight's a great example. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, right? There's real roadblocks in your way to having this type of performance, and he's able to do it, right? So I think that even contrasts with the game prior and that type of performance, which was also transcendent and amazing and incredible. I didn't mean it necessarily, maybe slightly. I took like a partial shot at Kyrie Irving, saying Kyrie Irving only had one time in his Nets career with back-to-back 40-plus point games, and Cam Thomas just achieved that for himself tonight, right? Like, and I didn't need to mention Kyrie Irving. It was more than enough just for it to be Cam Thomas. But in a lot of ways, like this game does, you said it, changes your mind on him, yes. And not that we need an out for it, but it's really hard to look at a player like that and know his skill set and see him in summer league and hear some of the talking points about areas he needs to improve or work on, but not really ever see the guy, right? This is a guy that's buried. They're not sending him down to the G League to work and play like they've done with Kessler Edwards or Day'Ron Sharp or any of these other guys. He's there on the bench not seeing any real minutes. So it just makes you question or doubt what you think the player could be. I don't know if we give the Nets credit for it, because now in these last 2 games, it's like they've unleashed this monster onto the league, and it goes, oh, turns out we've been hiding. I wouldn't even say 40, but a 30-point, 25-point scorer. And so many of the things that we discussed, like areas of concern, even defensively, the perimeter shot is there for him. That was the number one thing. He's doing that. He can play within himself. He can drive, draw fouls, get to the line. But even defensively, just the energy and focus is there. And that's all you've ever asked of any guy who's a high-level offensive player is, hey, man, just try to be a speed bump defensively, be active, be involved, be engaged, and that checks that box, and he's done that too. And I don't think it's probably really a good thing in a lot of ways that he's out there in the absence of, in the last game, Kyrie Irving, certainly, but Kevin Durant, right? Like, I think it matters that he's also able to do it when there's no other stars on the court. It's him leading this team.
Yeah, look, I mean, things have set up perfectly for like what his skill set is, right? Like we saw this in Summer League, and I don't think Summer League is a great proxy for the NBA because of just a lot of different factors. But we saw in the Summer League when he was willing to just go high volume, there's going to be games where he has it in his bag to like actually be super efficient. Like there's going to be a world where he was allowed to do this every game. There would be some rough ones to watch. It's not an anti-Cam Thomas thing. That's just like the truth, right? Like this kind of usage is insane. 29 shots a game, like almost no NBA players kind of like get or let me put it this way. Most NBA players are not allowed to take this many shots. Right. Right. Like just because it just wouldn't happen. It would never happen in their offense. If they tried to, they get benched. Like it just wouldn't really happen. So things have lined up pretty perfectly for him and his exact skill set, which is to say, I want to shoot every time down the court. Like, that's just what I want to do. That's the core part of my game. I am elite at this, right? Like I can score in a bunch of different crazy ways over a bunch of different sized and length defenders. So this game, frankly, without Kevin Durant, sets up really well for him from a showcase standpoint, because this is exactly what he's going to do. He's not a distributor. He's not going to run a high pick and roll. Like he's not going to do any of those things, which like point guardy kind of guys are going to need to do at some point. So I think like some of that stuff actually still sets up along where our original assessment was. Now, the part where he's able to actually be super efficient for games and carry a team for long stretches is like something I think frankly new, and I think actually to some degree repeatable. And one other thing to remember about this, and you mentioned it a little bit ago, you mentioned Kawhi and PG. Those were the primary defensive assignments on him. Now, he got switched out of it a lot because they tried to get him into a lot of different sets where they could just get him on to like the Batums and Marcus Morris before he fouled out. Like they were screening out of the Kawhi and PG assignments, but those were the guys guarding him. Like those were the primary defenders to at least start actions. Like, and they started blitzing him too. Like they knew they had to do this. So I think like all these other things are lining up that like the rest of the league, or at least in this game, was like, oh, this is a real thing. Like we can't just like let this happen. Like we're going to have to actually try to stop this right now for us to win the game, the Clippers.
Yeah. And I know we're going to, we'll talk a little bit about Sumner or about Claxton in this, but coming up, it's going to turn the conversation to what this performance means. What can it mean for the Brooklyn Nets? And we obviously know a lot of discussion around the deadline and moves they're trying to make, but just on that blitzing point, and I know it's like this little tiny footnote, when they sent the blitz in the, I want to say third quarter, 2 blitzing defenders, Claxton rolling to the rim. He made the right read, the right play, got it right into Claxton. It was right along those sequences where Claxton was having absolutely demonstrative jams at the rim, picking up techs. He had a little airmail delivery to Sumner from be well beyond the 3-point line on an alley-oop. Like those little things, to your point, the volume's going to come down when you have a Kevin Durant out there, when you have a Spencer Dinwiddie out there with you. But hey, listen, 7 of 11 from downtown, is that repeatable? Not with consistency, but the sheer fact that he has it in him to do that really matters, because we didn't see that early in his tenure. It was, can this guy shoot from beyond the arc? Okay, check that box off. So I just think comfortable, a lot more confidence, and certainly looks like he understands probably in a lot of ways, hey, I know exactly what this opportunity looks like. It's a chance for me to assert what I can do for this team, and we'll discuss whether or not maybe potentially for another one as well.
Look, he's never lacked confidence. We know that. We've known that from the very beginning. It's always been a question about what else was going on with him maybe, or the reasons why he was buried, which might be looking like a mistake. So we'll definitely talk about that here in a second, what the future could look like for him, what these next few days in Nets world are going to sort of maybe spell out for him, maybe for a short term and long term for his career. We'll talk about that in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and you don't want all the calories, you got to try a Built Bar. Just got through the holidays. I know I'm trying to goal set, trying to get out there, move a little bit more, trying to still work off. I know the holidays are kind of far away at this point, but like at this point, I'm still looking for anything I can get in the health department. That is where Built Bar comes in. They have the stats to back it up with the flavors to prove it: churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. Stats: 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, just for 17 grams of protein. You can get them at built.com. You can also go to Sam's Club. You get them at Walmart. Everywhere that you can buy snacks is where you're going to get, where you're going to go over and get Built Bar. Like I said, you go to built.com, you pick up all these different flavors. Sam's Club, Walmart. Built Bar is the truth. This healthy snack post holidays. Go to built.com.
All right. So when we then, this is hard, but this is the nature of it. And coming up on the back end of this episode, we're going to highlight some additional reporting around, obviously, a lot of speculation. Toronto Raptors, the deal with Dallas took a little bit of time to become officially final through the league because it looks like the Nets were at least trying to explore an additional third team deal. That's not off the table right now, but it's different mechanics, and we'll get to that. But the other thing is a big performance like this for Cam Thomas. We asked that question after the first game. Does it move the needle? It's one game. Well, now it's 2 games. And if you are a team, and if the Nets are looking to make a move, certainly you can now look at Cam Thomas and say, okay, we've got a guy that we can go and put out there, whether we're winning or losing the games, is going to be able to potentially give us 30-plus performances on a night in, night out basis. What do you think this means for Cam Thomas as a Brooklyn Net?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we said this the other day, and it's frankly even better now. I was like, couldn't have picked a better time to do this. I mean, like, I guess it was sort of just thrown into the fire here because of circumstance around the Kyrie and injuries. Look, Seth Curry's out. Obviously, Simmons, KD, like they have a lot of injuries right now. So that part, maybe he was just going to get to play now anyway, right? Like just because they were just down so many guards. But in terms of like the timing of it, if you're other teams, you have to have noticed this, right? Like, I don't know if it sweetens the pot a little bit because you're like, we've long since thought, well, it's really hard for the Nets to include young players in trades because they just don't have any young players that play. So right. That had been the problem with them forever. It's like, you want to throw in Day'Ron Sharpe, you want to throw in Kessler Edwards to these trades. Like other teams are going to say, well, they're not playing for you either. So they're going to be all dreaming on the few minutes here and there they get. This goes beyond that, right? This goes into a different territory that another team, especially like a building team, maybe can look at this and say, hey, this is something we can work with here. Like this is a guy, because again, just to reiterate the point from the beginning, that this just doesn't happen in the NBA. We said at the beginning, second youngest guy ever to score back-to-back 40-point games. Yes, the universe needs to just sort of collide a lot to have it all happen, but it's still, look, guys get to play all the time and don't do it. So it's like, it's just super hard to do this. And just to be on the stage, to know that it's in the limelight, to know that there's a lot of eyes on it. It's a high profile game against the Clippers, who see themselves as like potential champions, 2 of the best players in the game that have you as their assignment every time. Not every guy, most people can't do this. And so most NBA players can't do it. So yeah, in terms of like where it stands for him, I will say the Nets are in kind of an amazing spot here because I could see them dangling him now to like really improve the team now and trying to around Durant, or you can feel pretty good about holding him because they don't have a lot of young players on this roster. Like at some point things will need to get retooled. Right. And so like with that, I think you can feel good about having him as like a 6th man. Like, I don't think he still would start in this and like the best iteration of this team. It's okay. It's not a knock on him, but the like 6th man off the bench, like, because here's the thing, without Durant staggering scoring, like they're still going to need scoring even with Dinwiddie if he remains on the team. Like they're going to need scorers. They don't have tons of scorers on this team. It's like Durant, a little Dinwiddie, and then there's kind of a huge drop off to like the next guys that can sort of create their own shot and the shot clock guys, like that stuff. There's a real role for him even on like a team that kind of stands pat or tries to get better. So I just think they're in a really good spot. I wouldn't be shocked to see any version of this go. But just that we're even talking about a 5 days 3 days pre-trade deadline is kind of amazing to me. And they find themselves maybe having really kind of sort of by circumstance lucked into something.
Yeah, and that could be the case. And it's funny you mentioned six man because you and I, that was kind of where we were on the assessment. It was like, what could he be, right? What is the ceiling for him? Now, there's something else beyond that, obviously, for him potentially. But in the ideal version, this is when it was still Kyrie Irving on this roster. Be the spark plug that can come in off the bench and really dial it up. It's something that Nets haven't really had, right? Is a sixth man, that pure guy that can come off, light up a scoreboard for you, give you big stretches like that. Spencer Dinwiddie navigated from being kind of the guy off the bench in the second unit to then coming into the starting unit lineup before he ended up making his way, obviously, out to the Wizards, the Dallas, and then back to Brooklyn. So it's positive in that way. I do wonder where, and this is, I want to move on to Sumner here in a second, but I do wonder where the Nets stand. Like, what is their thinking? Because you and I have discussed and debated this around, well, how much draft capital do you send out? Who is it for? How many players? If a guy shows something and he's young, Nicholas Claxton, I'm going to talk about him later too. All of these things kind of swirl around where you can see a really successful path forward that involves Cam Thomas and that doesn't involve him. And I could also see a world, by the way, that if he were to get moved, we'd be talking about hearing a lot about Cam Thomas on the team he ended up on over the remainder of this season, which is always, I think, from a young talent standpoint, a difficult thing for a fan base to swallow. At least it would be for me. The other things that I do want to get to here beyond Cam Thomas is inside of this game specifically, just in terms of why were you able to almost pull this one out? You were in it down to the final minutes. Nicholas Claxton continues to do his thing. We almost don't need to belabor it, and we'll talk about him in a second. Edmund Sumner, though, I will say, over these last two games, I think is giving you a nice reminder of what he is truly capable of. And he played a really nice, consistent, and complimentary game. 9 of 17, 23 points, the 3 assists, the 5 rebounds, controlled not too many shots from beyond the arc with how good Cam was from that range, but still 2 of 3 there as well. I think as we wonder about what the final version after the deadline of this team is going to look like, Sumner is a guy that, if it's Spencer Dinwiddie, you can now look and say, well, Sumner can come in there and play in that backcourt together, and we can have that nice combination of length for stretches, a little bit of size defensively. So I think it's another nice box for him. It's not as meteoric as it was for Cam, so it almost downplays it, but these have been a good couple of games for Edmund Sumner.
Well, it's almost a shame because he's been really, really good, and it just hasn't been like in the stratosphere like Thomas, like Cam.
That's
so
what I
like,
mean. So it's, you almost dismiss it.
Almost in any other situation, we'd be talking about Sumner's game with maybe like equal amounts of praise. It only gets lessened, and it's not by nothing that he did. It's just that Cam's like thing was so unbelievable that the Sumner thing looks like sort of pales in comparison. But yeah, 29 and 23 in back-to-back games, has been really, really good defensively, can still get to the rim. Like again, his straight line drive stuff is so fast that he actually just like speeds himself through layups some couple times. Like he continues to actually have a little trouble finishing at the rim because he actually can't physically slow himself down. Yeah. Like we've seen so many guys that kind of like Kyrie was a master at this, right? Like he would get into the rim and everything would like weirdly slow down, right? But in a good way, right? It would slow down. So he'd find this perfect spot to be able to finish. Sumner's like still accelerating when he gets to the rim and then the ball careens off, in layup. So that's actually sort of been like an unfortunate part of his game. And it's not a knock on him. It's mostly just to be like, he's so damn fast that he just kind of gets out over his skis. Yeah, no, it's again, almost any other scenario we'd be leading with Sumner because he's been that good. And if you look down at this lineup, this is
best plus
just go down the lineup
tonight, by the way, on the entire team tonight for
Cam Thomas +3, Sumner +10, Claxton +7, Harris +4. He was an absolute turnstile on defense. Still ended up as a plus. Those guys, they won all their minutes. They won the game. It was just the drop off to the bench, and that's going to be expected. It's Drew Smith and guys like this that are coming in. But the starters, they won. Like they did everything they could, and they just weren't able to kind of make it up against a couple of superstars. But yeah, no, Sumner gets short shrifted a little bit only because Cam was so great.
Okay, so coming up in a second here, Michael Scotto provided an update around the conversation with the Toronto Raptors and some of the discussions that are happening of targets the Brooklyn Nets have. Is there a price that is too steep for the Nets to improve this roster ahead of the deadline? We'll break that down next.
All right, got to talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You're not making, on Prize Picks, all you're doing is you're not going for salaries. You're not going for just trying to put lineups together. You're not trying to going against sharks in the water. You're just making entries on Prize Picks. You're going more or less on the Prize Picks player projections. And that's all you have to do. It's very, very easy. They figured out daily fantasy. They made it super simple so you can have fun with this. You go points, rebounds, assists. Like if you had Cam, let's say this, you wanted to go more on Cam Thomas points for tonight. That was easy. You were done by probably the midway through the second quarter, right? Like that would have been that easy if you just trust in Cam, which I know a lot of you folks in the Nets chat right now are trusting these guys. Just go more on these guys in Nets world right now and feel pretty good about it. All you do on Prize Picks, 2 to 6, pick 2 to 6 players. Choose if they're going to score more or less on their Prize Picks projections. You can win up to 25 times your money. You're not competing against other people, just you versus the projections. You can make those entries in 60 seconds or less. Safe and fast withdrawals. Available in 30 states, plus our friends in the North and Canada. Download Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. You have to use the promo code Locked On, just like our podcast network. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy.
Okay, so as we noted in the last segment, and we'll just kind of give the very brief cliff notes, the Brooklyn Nets had made the trade with Kyrie Irving, sending him to Dallas. They were getting back Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, and some picks. Then this was left open for the moment as the Nets were continuing to explore potentially adding a third team. Just so people know, the mechanics that are different there is ultimately it would be the equivalent of saying Spencer Dinwiddie never actually comes to Brooklyn. He ends up somewhere else. In this scenario, potentially the Toronto Raptors. The deal is finalized, so Spencer Dinwiddie is a Brooklyn Net. He can still be traded, but you can't add anyone else into the trade along with him. So it would have to be him and picks going out solely. So it does change how the mechanics can look. What becomes interesting is, as I said, Michael Scotto reporting over on Hoops Hype mentioned that they had expressed an interest in trading for Toronto Raptor forward Pascal Siakam. League sources told Hoops Hype the interest in Siakam was first reported by Mark Stein. Toronto, however, covets Nic Claxton as an expressed interest in acquiring him in the trade discussions. And in this regard, they also note Ben Simmons and several first-round draft picks have been discussed in the trade conversation with the Raptors. So the Nets have also separately expressed interest in OG Anunoby. This is what is kind of rattling around right now. The very direct one-to-one question here is, are you willing to give up Nicholas Claxton in a trade for Pascal Siakam?
Oh, man. I didn't think you were going to ask that. I feel like
I'll tell you my answer. Because my assumption is it's Nicholas Claxton, multiple first-round picks, maybe some swaps involved for Siakam. My answer would be no. Because, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, because I by the way, I'm a huge fan of Pascal Siakam, but I am not a fan of sacrificing what has been the third best player of your team all season long behind Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. What in this moment is your second best player behind Kevin Durant, and who is a 23, going to be 24-year-old player who in this season alone has shown you how much more room he has to grow as a player. It's just a year from now when he's under that incredibly low-cost contract, you could be talking about flipping him for multiple first-round picks if you're another team. I don't want the Nets to do that, but that's where his true value is. I am, however, very interested in this idea that the Toronto Raptors will be willing to take Ben Simmons and maybe all of the picks and give back an OG or a Siakam. That deal I'm ready to do right now.
So, okay. Siakam's a better player than Claxton. So I think I think most people would feel very comfortable saying that. I don't think that's a hot take or anything. So Claxton is just like a better all around player, having a very, very good season also. Right. So I think that, although the 3-point shooting's down a little bit, I think that from that standpoint, I'm it's close for me. The thing I would worry about with a trade like that is sending out Claxton. And it's almost like specifically Claxton is that while Siakam is the better player, it would actually not make the team, I think, all that better because they would have such a gaping hole in a situation like that where they would have to just be doing something else also because they would just have no centers. I mean, they're already kind of have size issues, right? When it comes to size and girth. And Claxton's out. Kick this coverage here so completely that we've sort of been able to slide past it a little bit, but to send him out, I think would be a little throwing the baby out of the bathwater. you'd be bringing in the better player for sure in Siakam, just all around, can score, can handle the ball, like can just do a lot of different things, is a good defender too, and makes a lot more money. I mean, 35 million, but I think it would just like not make the team better. It'd be like this. It'd be kind of a thing where it's like, I do that it's like Kevin Durant insurance on the future, right? So they have like another like viable sort of like two-way good wing player that if Durant were to leave, right, then, but I think if you traded Claxton for him, you would maybe set yourself up something like for the future. I don't really know, but you would just be, it would immeasurably harm the team this year. Like they'd have no chance. They would have no interior presence at all. So I think it'd be such a problem.
And that's the strange thing about it, because I agree with you on what Siakam is, and I love Siakam as a player, but Nicholas Claxton has become like he's become like the soul of the team this season, right? Like he's the defensive anchor. He's the game he had tonight was insane. He's doubling up. He's switching over. He's helping, Yuta Watanabe starts by blocking a shot, and Nicholas Claxton go ahead and assists him and then finishes off with another block out on the perimeter. There's just so much value to him, and he represents so much insurance around what Ben Simmons hasn't been to this point this season, that it would just be really hard to say that you make a move like that and really feel like you change the potential this year. Like, I think, yes, you could get there, but don't forget, especially in a move like that, they got to match up a whole bunch of money too. It's $8 million for Claxton. It's $35 million for Siakam. And whether or not Joe Harris has been bad, okay, throw that in. You're still another $10 million shy of making this deal happen. So other things are going to have to be involved here in addition to capital. And I do worry about, we talked about when Durant comes back and just getting him back into rhythm before the playoffs. We're already talking about bringing in two new players in Dinwiddie and in bringing in Dorian Finney-Smith. Now you add another new player and take out some familiar faces. There's a lot of continuity to sort out there. And by the way, having better players is always the better solution, but it does potentially present more problems. My stance would be that I think if you can make a deal with Toronto, and I'm actually, I hate to say it, like I'm also like in between about Fred VanVleet and how I feel about that potential. To me right now, if you can get Siakam for the picks and Ben Simmons, obviously, that's a home run. And if you can look about OG Anunoby in some version of that scenario, that's a home run. I don't know if I would say getting Siakam at that price tag would make the most sense in the world.
Yeah, so it's funny about this because like with Claxton, see, this is one of those situations that no fan ever wants to hear about, but here's the truth is, to engineer big trades for really good players, eventually you have to give something up, right? And the whole goal of player development is to trade pieces to trade up the superstar scale, right? Like that is the goal. Ben Simmons is trading up on Ben Simmons is like impossible. So I can't imagine a world where like the Simmons plus the pick gets it done. Like I just
picks all the picks probably. But I would
even know what that, man. Even that might be close.
Here's the money that matches, and here's 3 first-round picks, right? That would be the sacrifice, probably.
So this is the problem. So it's like a good thing and a bad thing, or it's like a double-edged sword, because it's like you need to have the guy that you kind of fell in love with, right? To be able to package that guy for the much better player. Mm-hmm. So you had to have watched that guy get good and right. Be a good value and way outplay his contract. That's the guy that creates enough value for himself to then, so if you can trade up and get the guy, right? Like, and so I get that no one wants to hear that because it sucks. And I would be first in line of not wanting to see Claxton leave here because it's been an unbelievably cool story. He's been amazing. And he's been one of the very best contracts in all basketball. Other teams are now aware of this too. And so if you want other teams' best players, like you might just have to do it. Again, I'll go back to my first point, which was, I don't know if that specific deal is the one to do for him,
but
I don't want, but what I wouldn't want to be is the Claxton's untouchable camp here, because there probably is a world where there is someone else out there that we would say, yeah, we would definitely do it. This is why you maybe just develop guys and get them on good contracts so you can shift them out at some point and get and scale up your team. I don't know. Maybe he's not a perfect example for this because they actually just need him so bad too. He's not a redundant asset for them. Like he is just a necessary asset, and he is just that important for them. So maybe this particular deal is not the right one, but I don't want to be against it because I just don't think that would be good business either. Because at some point you just need to you need to send something out. Like no one's taking Ben Simmons. Like that's a negative asset. Like you have to sweeten the pot on Ben Simmons now with other stuff. Just if you wanted to get off the money.
And I think that's like the interesting thing we said there. I'll give you all the picks we have to move. It's essentially just saying, here's all the picks for Siakam alone or anybody. That's the example. And we're throwing in the match. It's us dumping a guy who, in theory, you could end up benefiting from, right, with a big number, but he comes back around and gets healthy. Maybe there's value for you there. Close out on the idea of now we mentioned how good Cam Thomas has been. This isn't a knock on Cam Thomas, but if we're talking about the value and the role of Nicholas Claxton versus Cam Thomas, I can look out and I can see players that can have the potential for that thing that Cam Thomas does. Now, these last couple of games have been eye-opening, as we said at the top, in a lot of different areas. But I will dangle Cam Thomas. Like I can dangle him out there if that helps move the needle on things, depending on who you're trying to target. I do find it fascinating when you have Dinwiddie coming in, Dorian, Finney-Smith, like. The rotation is getting congested here. There is going to be some need for thinning, especially if you're going to bring in another player or two. I will be curious about what other names get mentioned beyond Joe Harris for the salary match, and then real sought after players. And it makes sense that Toronto in this instance is so vying for Nicholas Claxton because he's kind of the mold of players that they're into up in Toronto. So.
Well, he's the exact guy they need. Like they need,
I know.
They need a center like him. They're desperate for a center that can like actually defend and rim protect. Like that's the exact dude they need. So I get why they would want him. I totally get it.
And the last thing I'll say out the door on it is, first of all, thanks to everybody that showed up for the lives that we did recently. We'll stick around for a few minutes after this one over on YouTube to break it down. And tomorrow, bonus episode talking with Nick Angstadt from the Locked On Mavs podcast. We just talked about both sides of the deals, threw around some questions to one another and had some fun. That'll be up on Tuesday as well. But it is an interesting hedge about if Kevin Durant in the offseason says, hey, it's time for me to move on. Nicholas Claxton is still an incredible talent and an incredible player, but his value might look different if you don't have any superstars on your roster and you're building from scratch with Cam Thomas. In that way, this game was kind of fun too, where you didn't have any superstars. And Nicholas Claxton was still really effective, right? And his value was still very much there. And that's something that can get blurred when you play with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, right? Your value can get very much skewed based around playing with superstars. That was really positive to see from Nic Claxton as well. He remains the anchor. He remains someone that can do things on both ends of the floor, no matter who's he's playing with.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's exactly right. It's like it's happening. He's having a phenomenal impact. And I questioned this a little bit too. I was like, does he need to sort of have these other guys around him in order to like really realize the best version of himself? Right. I mean, obviously every player does, but he is showing that he can stick around here on like an independent level. And I think we kind of knew that. And it's just proof positive on something I think we already thought, but there's sometimes not a ton of chances to actually see it in action. Okay. Yeah. We will hang around YouTube here for a few minutes. See, there's tons of people. If you're firing in questions, much appreciated. If you throw in at Locked On Nets, we'll try to bring a few of these up. You got to keep it clean or else you're not going to get up there. Make sure if you're over on the podcast that you make sure you subscribe over on YouTube. And I will say just as Adam said this, and I'll say it again to reiterate a thank you. Yesterday and today were easily the two biggest days in Locked On Nets history. It's not even close. They completely crushed our previous best days by like numbers that I quadruple numbers. Like these numbers are insane to us. So we're really appreciative of everyone that's shown up, people that are sticking around, more people coming every day. If you are in YouTube right now, or if you're over on the podcast, go and subscribe to Locked On Nets. Get us to 5,000 subscribers. We're almost there. I feel like we're going to be there probably by the end of the week. You can be part of that. Go and subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube.
Beautiful things don't ask for attention. That's Sean O'Connell, as played by Sean Penn in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Never seen it, but
oh my God,
is one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again tomorrow and in a second on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
All right, welcome into the Post Podcast. Quick little peek behind the curtain and some housekeeping. You're going to watch me do this real quick so Doug can use it on the back end. And we let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. And now we move ourselves into the post-podcast podcast after I correctly do the proper lead ad read. If you have your questions, you know the deal, at Locked On Nets. Very curious to see what people have to say about these performances and certainly expectations about wanting or being willing to keep or trade some of these guys. Let's go with Con. Like Cam and Clax are reasons we have some faith in Marks and this team. Okay, I'm going to pause on the have faith in Marks because this is a hard one. I've loved Marks at times. I've been incredibly frustrated with Marks at times. The trade he got back for Kyrie started to make me love Marks. This is probably his wheelhouse, maximizing value, and making deals like this. I'm curious to see what happens here because I think it's not a 0% chance that they are battling, making the big swing and emptying out the cupboard so they're completely bare going forward versus wanting to kind of trust some of what they've built here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to reserve this feeling till Thursday to see what sort of happens. We've been on record to say that I think there's lots of different directions they can go. I am not a total believer that this team right now, I don't think the current version of this team can win the championship. Okay. Unless Simmons just goes absolute nuclear and we do not have any evidence that that's going to happen. So I think that's just too hard of a call to make. If he comes back from the All-Star break and he's amazing, I still think they're probably a guy short if they don't make any other moves. I would be very hesitant unless I was completely certain around Kevin Durant's future here about what to do, how much I sent out at this deadline.
Yep.
Like I would have to be so sure. I do not want to be, if I'm Sean Marks, I don't want to be in the prove it to Kevin Durant category all that much because this can just go wrong. And we've seen it go wrong when you base all your decisions around worrying about if a guy is going to stay. Like Cleveland did this forever. The Lakers had done this to some degree and have finally kind of stopped doing it to some degree with LeBron, but it's a little too late with all their stuff. It just can be really hard. In a lot of ways, I don't think they are like this as an organization. Like they shipped out Kyrie. That was clearly either they didn't care about KD's reaction or had some kind of approval or whatever. I don't know. Or just didn't want to re-sign him. So I don't know. I'm going to reserve my opinion on this till I think there's going to be a certain group of fan that's going to go completely nuts if they don't make a ton of high profile moves and get a Siakam or something like that at the trade deadline. I don't know if I'll totally be in that camp just because I can see a path forward. I can see how that version of that could go really, really wrong. And I'd be concerned about mortgaging everything for the hope that KD stays, right? I think that's a little trouble. That'd be a little troubling.
And I put up Gary's comment there about lowering the expectations. Yes, it should obviously change after Kyrie Irving has been traded. And I don't think it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing in the sense of selling what this can be for Kevin Durant going forward. It's a good thing that they have him under contract and they have all the control to be able to make decisions around that. And to your point, the deadline and what moves happen or don't happen, even though it has not been shown to this point, there is the world where Ben Simmons at least incrementally looks better over the remainder of the season and something around his value shifts, even if it's from nothing to slightly more than nothing, right? And that can make a difference it can make a difference in the offseason. You can still make moves at that point. So there are other times when the Nets can make decisions around this roster. I don't know. See, and this is where there's a leads into this from Hector. I don't agree. I mean, there's probably a small move no matter what that they want to make. They've talked about wanting to get some more maybe size or support behind Nicholas Claxton. Okay. But no, I mean, they've already, listen, the Kyrie Irving deal is a part of the deadline. He's made that trade successfully, at least from a certain perspective. So no,
I think he's very safe. I think Marks is very safe. I think that there's I don't think his job. I thought there was maybe some concern about his job over the summer. I do not think that anymore. I think that his job is actually, I think he's safer than Durant at this point. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think that he's been given full autonomy here, and I think he has the blessing to kind of just do whatever. The Kyrie thing was basically proof positive of that, and I think he's completely safe no matter what happens at this deadline.
And by the way, it was mentioned that supposedly Joe Tsai said, yes, execute the trade with Kyrie and don't send him to the Lakers. Like that was one of the guidelines
too.
Which is like, listen, is it petty? 100%. Do I get it from his perspective? Totally. Right. Like, and by the way, if that shortchanged the best possible package that you get back in return, that would be frustrating to, potentially to see. But this happens all the time in sports. You want to end up, was NFL, Brett Favre. Oh, you want to go to Minnesota? Good luck. You're going to New York for a year. Right. And then you ultimately get where you want to go. And in that sense, I think that Sean Marks and Joe Tsai, like they're on the same page, for better or worse. Like they're on the same page together. So fans may be frustrated by Sean Marks for different reasons. I don't think Joe Tsai is. Joe Tsai's frustrations were mostly directed maybe at Kyrie or at circumstances and things that have gone on. And he's trusted him, like with Kevin Durant's trade request. He's trusted Sean Marks to execute what he thinks is going to be the best plan.
I have one. Go ahead. You do that one and I'll do the next one.
Yeah. Just this one quick one from Kyle. Your thoughts about the KD trade for JB. So you said 0% chance, which is good because it's not going to happen at the deadline. If you want to go up the chain of command and think about Joe Tsai, Jaylen Brown.
What's JB?
Jaylen Brown, Boston. It reads. This is a, by the way, I'm only bringing it up to clarify that Kevin Durant's not going anywhere in the short term. This wouldn't be the kind of trade that would be happening in my mind. And I only bring it up to further iterate. Remember, Jaylen Brown was vocal in support of Kyrie Irving around some of the issues that he was having with the organization and towards Joe Tsai specifically. So unlikely that Jaylen Brown is going to be someone in that vein that even if a trade were to happen down the road, that the Nets would be looking to bring back in.
Yeah, I got a couple basketball related ones, not trade related ones. One's good, one's bad. I'll do the bad one first.
Okay.
Clippers hunted Joe Harris in every possession. Not sure what Vaughn was thinking. I agree with this. I was thinking this the entire game. It was very obvious. His guy was just they got him into every switch that they wanted. He was a complete and utter turnstile. I think I said that like in passing on the podcast.
Yep.
I know I 100% thought it. I tweeted.
No, you said
it's on record. He was terrible. It's really actually a problem. He's lost so many steps here that I agree that it was actually really, really hard to keep him on the court. And I don't know why he was on the court. I know that they don't have really many options at that point. Like it's like kind of Kessler, Edwards, Yuta. Like they don't have a ton of other things that can go here, but this Harris thing is really concerning. I don't see it at all. The defense was horrible. And
the culmination was
these are hard match. This is, by the way, this is not me apologizing for him. These are hard matchups. Like the Kawhi getting into a switch and PG getting into a switch.
Yeah.
I mean, Norman Powell cooked him a couple times. Like it was just very, I mostly just wanted to agree with Richard that I agree with this assessment. It was really, really bad. And it's been sort of trending this direction for him. And I don't know.
The culmination of that was the inbounds play under the Nets basket where Joe Harris both not only allowed Nicholas Batum to get ahead of him going to the basket and then also committed the N1 foul on him. Like that.
Yeah, it was all, it was,
I know it was all bad, but it's always like you see that one thing, you go,
it was just all game, man. It was all game. It's a miracle he was on the plus side. Like it's a miracle he was on the plus. It was really, really, really bad. This is a good one. I think Spencer Dinwiddie and Claxton are going to complement each other game really well. Lobs to Claxton. I agree with this too. Claxton has not had like a high pick and roll guy. Really, for a lot of the minutes he's been on, like we kind of saw a little bit of it with Harden and him. And Harden's like the master of getting guys, big guys into really good situations like this. Dinwiddie is not Harden, but he was really good. They ran this this is all they ran with Kenny Atkinson was the high pick and dive. So I think that the Nets haven't really run this that much because they haven't really had the personnel to do it. And the guys that want to do it, but I'm excited to see this also. So that's just you have any thoughts on this, Adam? I know you're
yes. Well, it's funny. Like I was contemplating whether or not I'll play it. I'll play it at some point. I had gotten the clip off of Nicholas Claxton talking in the pregame about the trade first. We said it's tough. It's a business. We understand that. We got to play with the guys we have going forward. And then he mentioned specifically with Dinwiddie, he said it was just my first year. He's like, I liked working with him. He said he feels like he's gotten like 10 times better, to which Sarah Kustok on the broadcast said 50 times better. So, like that pairing worked well, even in its infancy. And Nicholas Claxton is such an improved player at this point that I really do get excited around what that combination can be in a different way when they're on the floor together. And that bonus episode tomorrow with Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs, he talks about what's improved for Spencer Dinwiddie in his time since he left Brooklyn, specifically the perimeter shooting. Like there's areas of his game that are better than they were the last time we saw him in a Nets uniform, which is a really big positive for Brooklyn.
One quick point about this, and I skipped over this, and I just scrolled by it. Someone made this point. Shoot. Okay, I can't find it in a thing. So sorry to whoever said this, but there was a reminder that Dorian Finney-Smith maybe probably takes those Harris minutes a lot, and then all of a sudden some of that defensive stuff isn't a problem. So I just kind of forgot that DFS was coming for that comment, but I agree with that assessment.
And the other is, here's the really interesting thing. In a trade scenario, the money of Harris is there to be used. The interesting thing for me is with Dorian Finney-Smith coming in, there is this world where, and fans will say incredibly overpriced, low value, et cetera, for Harris. There is a world where he ends up back in a role, maybe even coming off the bench, where his only objective is to be a spot up shooter and nothing else, right? Over the last couple of seasons, we've talked about how he's tried to expand his game on the offensive end, do a few more things, kind of out of necessity, but clearly he doesn't have the capacity on the defensive end. The offensive game has been very up and down. But if, there is this world where it's just like, dude, like all you need to be doing is taking 5 3-pointers a game. And if they go in, great. And if they don't, it's a real disaster. But these other players do change what the requirements are of a Joe Harris inside of this roster. So it'll be interesting to see if he even makes it past the deadline.
I'm going to comment on this. No one has defended Joe Harris more than this podcast. Believe me. Times that were the time. I know Al Mac's a longtime listener, so I think Al Mac knows this on some level. Appreciate you. You've been around for obviously a long time with a lot of comments. I'm mostly putting it out there like we've defended Harris like at every step of the way. This is not an anti-Harris. This is not anti-Harris. This is a pro-Harris guy saying that this might be kind of done. So I need to be. I want to make sure there's a clarification on that.
And it's interesting the one again, and I'll still say that, like, I don't know, I'm so fascinated. It's like the Seth Curry now with the injury and everything else. It's just at some point you're going to thin this thing out, and it's really just about, can you come in and knock down shots, and whichever guy can serve that role the best, like that's more than enough, because this team is going to look. I like what they've been defensively and loved it at times. They're going to look even better defensively now with Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith. Like they can become a really dangerous defensive unit for big stretches when Kevin Durant's back out there too.
Yeah. I think we're gonna probably check out of here pretty soon here. You got another one? Yeah.
I just the only thing, and speaking of guys that we're fans of, I have carried the banner for Yuta Watanabe. I agree. This is the interest. They have a lot of guys that can do this thing. I love Yuta, and I've wanted him to see a few more minutes. We've also seen him struggle at stretches too. Nobody else. There's no perfect player here to plug in and replace those perimeter shots, as long as a combination of Sumner to a very low level because he's not a big perimeter shooter, Cam Thomas if he's still here, Yuta Watanabe, anybody that can knock down perimeter shots. If you can make those up, then it's all good. Like any combination will satisfy the needs here. So it's going to be, again, it's just a matter of, by the way, the rotations, I don't know what the rotations are right now. Like there's a world where Edmund Sumner's been playing, big minutes here the last couple of games. He may go right back to seeing barely any time on the court potentially once you get Dinwiddie and Finney-Smith in here.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of like in some ways not really a great exercise right now to try to figure out rotations. Yeah. I think we're too close to like a time where everything can just upend it again. So I think we probably will hold off. We kind of get lucky that there's like one more game here against the Suns, and then it's another day and then the trade deadline, because
we'll see. We'll see Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith tomorrow night.
Oh, are they playing tomorrow night? I know Kyrie and Markieff were okay to go for Dallas in 2 days. Okay, yeah, so we'll see them. So we might see them for one game. Like I don't really want to go too nuts with the rotational stuff. I know I mentioned the Spencer Dinwiddie to Claxton thing, but I just think there's a world where one or two of these guys just aren't on the team anymore, and you can be sure that Thursday night into Friday we'll do long assessments on like what the final version of whatever ends up looking like.
Oh man, it's going to be a good one. I don't have anyone else to shout out other than I'm seeing a lot of the comments, right? There's comments around KD and Cam and what that looks like. That might be the most disappointing pre-trade deadline thing, is that we're not going to see Kevin Durant with, some combination of this, even a little bit of Cam Thomas. We've seen them before together, but it'd be nice to see a little bit of that. You like all of this to have happened 2 weeks ago with a healthy Kevin Durant. So you could say, okay, then what tweaks do we want to make? Instead, they have to kind of make some of these decisions in the blind, knowing what the skill sets are and what the compliments can be.
Yeah, some interesting. Oh, maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow. Some interesting KD stuff coming out after this game. With just some of his comments and maybe some what's being called un-KD like interactions with some media. Not bad stuff here. Said KD liked the fight, but then kind of left and didn't answer a lot of questions and declined comments on his way out of Barclays. So we can have everyone freak out now about that and just have everyone read into what that they might do. I was just doing a quick thing. The reason I asked is the reason I was looking actually for Kevin Durant stuff. We can get out of here was because we had gotten some messages that KD had left the bench early, and I was looking because I was trying to figure out if that had been true or not. I don't think it was, but he definitely left without answer questions. Also doesn't have to answer questions, but it is interesting after a game like that to. KD's usually open for stuff, and I don't know if multiple reporters who I trust here are coming out and saying, or that we trust that are coming out and saying that it was unlike him to kind of have this reaction. We can start looking into stuff like that. Oh baby,
I was gonna say in the old most cases it's a total nothing burger unless it's the Brooklyn Nets. So we'll be back in obviously breaking down it all. Another game tomorrow night. The Suns. Y'all on these podcasts messing out potential trades up. Well,
listen to the Locked On Nets postcast. That's what we say here.
You gotta do it. So much of the best information is in the postcast.
I was looking for one before that just called us losers 5 times. I was gonna put that one. Gonna put that one up too.
You always gotta listen. We take the good, we take the bad, you take it all, and there you have the facts of following the Locked On Nets podcast. Guys, we will be back again, of course, next time talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball.